Wait, what? No. Let's try. We last left our story in 1860, when the first Indians were brought to Natal as indentured laborers. The Indians were mainly from Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, and UP. The period of immigration and indenture lasted until 1917, and in that time, 384 ships transported over 152,000 Indians to Natal. In the last video, we spoke about how the Indians themselves were not actually laborers back in India, and also about how some of them didn't even know what they were going to be doing in Natal. The reason for this is due in large part to how they were recruited. In the 1860s, India, under British rule, was struck by famine and several epidemics, and life was rough for Indians, especially for those in the rural areas. The recruiters, or Arkatis, promised that the journey to South Africa would lead to wealth, land, and better living conditions. Some villagers were even told that they were being recruited to work in the major cities in India like Calcutta, but were instead persuaded or forced to sign the contract for indenture and shipped off to Natal. Such was the case of a woman from Lucknow. She was told that she would be able to earn 25 rupees per month to take care of a baby in a European household who lived 6 hours away from Calcutta via sea. She thus boarded the ship, but instead of being brought to that family, she was instead brought to Natal. The ships that transported the Indians left from what was then known as Madras, which is now known as Chennai, and also from Calcutta, now known as Kolkata. For many, the journey from their villages to the ports was long and arduous, and many died or fell ill along the way. Those who did make it to the ports had to wait for more recruits to join before the ships could set sail. Some, such as those who had been misled by the recruiters, had misgivings when they reached the port. However, they were told that in order to return, they had to pay 1 for the journey to the port and 2 for the journey back. As many of them were poor villagers, they could not afford this. Thus, they had no choice but to continue on. For those who boarded the ships, they were given a pass and a tin ticket. Life aboard the ships was again difficult. Many of the Indians had never even seen the sea before. There are also many reports of the Indians being abused and humiliated. Women, especially single women, were at risk of being taken advantage of. And in 1866, passengers aboard the Padmavati reported that the doctor aboard the ship, Dr. Patterson, had been sexually abusing them and taking advantage of them. The doctor was eventually charged, but did not face any serious consequences. At this point in the story, it's also worth noting that South Africa was not the only country that Indians were sent to as indentured laborers. As early as 1834, indentured Indians were sent to Mauritius, Reunion Island, Guyana, Trinidad, Suriname, Jamaica, and Fiji, amongst others. For the Indians who arrived in Natal, shortly after disembarking, they then signed their contracts. Again, as we previously discussed, most of them did not actually know what the contract said, as they could not read or speak English. So let's have a look at what the contract actually entailed. The contract stipulated that the working week should consist of 6 9-hour days. The basic wage for men over 17, which did not change during the entire period under review, was 10 shillings a month during the first year of indenture, with annual increments of 1 shilling a month in each subsequent month. Women and minors were paid half these amounts. Food rations were also covered by the contract. Migrants over the age of 12 were entitled to 2 pounds of dal, 1 pound of salt, 2 pounds of salt fish, and 1 pound of ghee or oil monthly. Migrants under the age of 12 were entitled to 3/4 of an adult ration. Employers were also expected to provide free medical attention in case of sickness and accommodation in good repair. In addition, Natal employers issued a set of clothing to each migrant at the point of embarkation. Overall, these contracts sound quite fair, but as we'll see, most of these stipulations were not adhered to, and life for the Indians did not at all resemble that was stipulated in the contract. After signing the contract, they then had to travel to their place of work in Natal. Again, this was a long and difficult journey, and again, many died or fell ill along the way. Those who did make it found that there were actually no provisions made for them, and so they had to build shacks in which to sleep. Eventually, they were given barracks in which to live. There was also no medical attention available. Life in the sugarcane fields was tough, and children as young as the age of 5 were expected to work alongside their parents. Although the contracts stipulated the minimum pay and maximum hours of work, these were not met. Working hours were long and the pay was low. Sometimes wages were even withheld as a form of punishment. There was also no process in place for Indians to cancel their contracts. An example of what would happen to those who tried to speak up about their mistreatment is that of the tale of a laborer named Raani Sa. An excerpt from a brief history of Indian indenture in South Africa, written by Tulsi Mutli, says, "The white employer was very angry with Ramasamy. He tied Ramasamy up on a nail on the wall and whipped him with a sjambok. He hit Ramasamy very badly, but Ramasamy could still wiggle about. This enraged the boss. He tied the poor man to the rafters of the roof, and he hit and hit until he could hit no more. Ramasamy's back was finished. The skin fell off and blood poured. Ramasamy was taken to the magistrate. The magistrate listened and then ordered him back to the estate because he did not have a pass. Ramasamy did not go back to the estate. He instead walked back to Durban and complained to the protector, but the protector arrested him for desertion and threw him into jail." As you can see, the Indians were not respected, and those who tried to speak up were not given any help or support. After the period of indenture, a small percentage of Indians chose to return to India. On the 13th of February in 1871, the first group of Indians returned to India on a ship called the Red Riding Hood. Some of the returning Indians lodged complaints of the conditions and ill treatment of the laborers in South Africa. An official board of inquiry was set up to resolve this, but they didn't really improve the lives of Indians in Natal. Apart from those Indians who returned, the majority of Indians chose to stay in Natal. Some felt that they would be more prosperous in the new land, and some chose to re-indenture for another 5 years, as they could not yet afford to go back to India. There was also the issue of caste. As the Indians had lived and eaten with other caste groups in South Africa, they would not be welcomed back by their families in India at the time. In addition, there were free Indians who came aboard the ships but paid their own passage. These Indians came mainly from Gujarat in India. They came as traders, artisans, teachers, shop assistants, and many set up small businesses and shops to cater to those Indians who were living in Natal. The success of the business ventures of these Indians was of much concern to the white settlers in Natal. The white settlers were wary of competition, as well as the growing wealth and political influence of the Indian immigrants. This, combined with the fact that many of the indentured Indians chose to stay, caused much ire for the British and white Afrikaans population in South Africa. As a result of their concern, much anti-Indian legislation was published during this time. Legislation such as that introduced in the Free State that included denying Indians permanent right of residence in the province, or that in the Orange Free State that prohibited Indians as well as Arabs, Chinese, or in their own words, any Asiatic or colored person, from running businesses or farming in the Orange Free State. There was also Act 25 of 1891, which withdrew the rights of previously indentured Indians to obtain citizenship, own fixed property, or trade in Natal, and allowed the government to assign Indians certain streets and areas in which to live. Indeed, this last stipulation is quite reminiscent of the Group Areas Act of Apartheid. Perhaps the most infamous was Act 17 of 1895, which imposed a £3 tax on all Indians who opted out of re-indenture and did not wish to return to India. For that time period, this tax was exorbitant, and many Indians could not afford to pay it. The punishment for not paying this tax was imprisonment or deportation. This tax in particular was only repealed in 1913 due to the intervention of an Indian lawyer. The Indian lawyer had come to South Africa to represent an Indian merchant. This lawyer's name was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. In the next video, we'll talk a bit more about Gandhi, his life in South Africa, and his role in the betterment of life for Indians in this country. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.